Hello and welcome to Shelf Centered. Thank you so much. Please remember to like and subscribe. It really means a lot. This is a review of no spoilers, okay? No spoilers here. Um, so, Consider Phlebas. It's actually, I already read The Player of Games, and that was what I was recommended to read first in the Culture series. And Consider Phlebas then is number one, technically, in the series by Iain M. Banks, the late and great Iain M. Banks. I'm sad that it's taken me so long to finally read the series because these first two books that I have read have been excellent, and I would highly recommend it, and I can't wait to read more. I have Use of Weapons back on my shelf, and I'm already just looking forward to reading that, and that's number three. I might actually go in publication order from now on. I'm kind of glad I had this kind of outlook on it. The Player of Games, I think I liked a little bit more than Consider Phlebas because it's a little more kind of put together. It's not put together, maybe it just streamlined. It's a little more streamlined. It's a little more cohesive of a tale. I liked it because it kind of what's interesting is Consider Phlebas, the first in the Culture series, is more a book about looking at the culture from its enemy's perspective, which is just an interesting take on a series that's about the enemy, technically, in this first book. And but that's the first book in the series that you get it from the enemy's perspective. I'm kind of glad that I had at least somewhat of a familiarity with the culture by reading book two, even though that one is also kind of its own, you get some of the sensibilities, I guess, of the culture through book two, especially with what they're trying to do there. But this one is just, it's interesting to take essentially what this does is it takes an analysis somewhat of the culture from the enemy's perspective. So I'll read the blurb because it'll do a better job than I will. The war raged across the galaxy. Billions had died. Billions more were doomed. Moons, planets, the very stars themselves faced destruction. Cold-blooded, brutal, and worse, random. Dirans fought for their faith, the culture for its moral right to exist. Principles were at stake. There could be no surrender. Within the cosmic conflict, an individual crusade. Deep within a fabled labyrinth on a barren world, a planet of the dead prescribed to mortals, lay a fugitive mind. Both the culture and the Adirans sought it. It was the fate of Horza, the Changer, and his motley crew of unpredictable mercenaries, human and machine, actually to find it, and with it their own destruction. So, essentially, what we really follow is this Horza character. He is what's called a changer. He can actually literally change his whole body, and he can look like another person. It's mostly people, and I guess alien species too. And so he has that ability. He has this ability to kind of change himself, make himself look, even change voice, all kinds of things. And he really does. He can, penetrate into wherever he wants to go. And so it follows him. He is he's against the culture. The culture, you kind of get, it stands for kind of allowing machines, for instance, to have their own sentience and essentially become literally citizens of the culture. And, and of course you would have other species that would be against something like machines being part of your culture and trying to be, and I've read enough Matrix or Dune's, Butlerian Jihad, and even Dune itself kind of comes from this idea of not trusting machines. So I get that too, even in a non-religious way. But in Consider Phlebas, it is more the religion. The religious Adirans are very much against the culture and against everything it stands for. And like the blurb said, they really can't coexist. So Horza, just kind of because, the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of a situation. He is on the side of the Adirans, not necessarily for anything other than that they're against the culture. the culture loses its ship. This and part of it is this what this called they call this the mind, and it's very advanced technology essentially, and on this planet of the dead, Skarza, is that what it is? Skarza, and so he's essentially, I mean, half the book really is him trying to get there, to the place, and on the way he gets involved in a mercenary, but even before that, I mean, while he's kind of starts out with him being tortured and then barely saved in the nick of time. Spoiler, sorry, but it's right off the right at the beginning, and he literally ends up, I mean, at one point getting taken by like this cannibalistic tribe on this planet that essentially attempts to eat him, and to literally coming together with this this mercenary company. It's really interesting. I mean, it doesn't stop. But one of the things is, and that's why I'm having a hard time, really staying focused here, is because the book itself really is not very focused. It's kind of all over the place, and it's a little more disjointed. Again, starting with the player of games, which was it was pretty straightforward and got us from point A to point B. Consider Phlebas is kind of jumping from one thing to the next, and you're kind of like, what is going on? And then finally, it does make sense. I think what I liked probably the most about Consider Phlebas is that it really does explore this universe, that there are these different places, there's different, I mean, even different groups of mercenaries that are made up of different kind of peoples and even machines, and getting to know the machines, and the machine's always like, I'm not just a machine. He'll refer to him as the machine. He's like, I literally am a citizen. You can't just treat me like this. And he's like, all right, well, do some calculations. And it's like, okay. So it's really an interesting take on the culture series. I think you get really close to this Horza, and it's an interesting choice that the author makes to, he'll call him Horza at some point. He'll call him the Changer a lot. He'll call him Horza at many points, often throughout, but also the Changer. And it's almost like, remember, he can change. And it's like, yes, I know. I definitely know he can change. I still know that, which is interesting. There was a point where he gets taken, I think I already said it, by these cannibals. And I'm almost like, well, I don't know if it's explained it well enough to be like, well, why doesn't he change himself to something very skinny to get out of his restraints and get out of this? Because even the first time you really get a glimpse of how changing works, he gets himself into this kind of mental state, and then overnight completely changes himself to look like the thing he wanted to make himself look like. And it's like, well, why didn't he just do that to get out of his restraints? And instead it's handled a different way, and it still makes sense and it still works. But the whole time I'm going, at least give me an explanation as to why he didn't just change again. Maybe you can't change more than once in a week. It takes a month, and maybe it did. Maybe it was the fact that he's out of food and water and in a rough situation or something. Anyway, I just was like, why don't we at least just address that? The elephant in the room, or the Changer in the room. Man, bad. So yeah, I think you like Horza quite a bit, but at the same time, Horza is like this interesting character because he's not necessarily a hero, and in fact, at one point, he's kind of like, hey, maybe I'm the worst enemy you've ever seen. I'm a villain, and definitely to the culture. And the culture it stands for this, kind of almost like extremely liberal, and definitely of the political spectrum of kind of like accept all, even machines, and this kind of utopian kind of mindset that that Horza is just absolutely against because they wronged him and whatever. But anyway, it's just very interesting. I have to say, Consider Phlebas is it's very good. It's not my favorite so far, but it's still up there. I still very much appreciated it and enjoyed what it brings. It is a classic of science fiction, and I think well deserved. And again, even a utopian society such as the culture is going to have its issues, and even it is attempting to kind of circumvent and spy and involved in intrigue and all that, and in kind of keeping its place in the universe. It's very, very an interesting take. I can't wait to read more in the culture. I think one of the thoughts that I had about this was kind of, I feel like the Star Wars machines are almost like the culture machines in that, obviously, clearly they're operated by a human and voiced by human, at least a human with C-3PO, because they're kind of like culture machines, because especially as a kid, I was definitely fearful, especially in Empire Strikes Back when C-3PO is taken apart. I was concerned, to say the least. One of our friends is getting hurt here, and luckily he's a machine and can be put back together, but that didn't mean that it didn't hurt me and make me feel something, because I just feel like, oh yeah, they kind of are this like sentient, they've gone past becoming just this thing we use, right? This mode of going from A to B. They've literally become part of the society, and it's like culture is essentially going, instead of one step further than Star Wars, and going, hey, they're even part of the society, and we'll give them their own rights, right? And I think, maybe there's some of that in Star Wars to some degree, but still, I mean, especially the main droids that we follow are not like that. So I'm sorry this review's kind of been all over the place, but there's just been a lot of thoughts and a lot of things that I wanted to get down that I have written down, and they're all disjointed and everything. But I all this is to say that I really enjoyed Consider Phlebas. I'm going to go with a 7 out of 10 for Consider Phlebas. Player of games, I'm going with an 8 out of 10. I don't even have a review for that, but if I were to review it, I'd probably go for 8 out of 10. I did like it a bit more. And again, I'm going to be reading more. I'm going to be reading more culture. I really enjoyed Consider Phlebas, and I think, anyway, it's earned its place in that kind of pantheon of classic science fiction. So anyway, hey, don't forget to like and subscribe. Appreciate you checking this out, bearing with me. It's disjointed review, and bye.